when you realize that nothing's really about you and that people are coming from their story and not yours.
Yeah.
And like what we always say is like, what's better than a better story of you is no story at all.
Yeah.
A spiritual chiropractor.
My friends call me the real life caregiver.
Talk it out. Boy. Welcome to Black Sheep Thinking Podcast, episode number 18, where we are discussing
The personal mind.
And we are Morgan Pierce. We are Morgan Pierce. I'm Morgan Pierce.
And I'm Andrew Potvin.
And we are two life coaches and best friends that help people discover the truth of who they are by putting down their thinking and becoming their innate intelligence to be happy.
It's becoming the truth of who you are every time. Every time you say it differently. I love it.
Yeah, I'm just going to keep saying
I see how many different ways you can say it. I like the one where you were like, get out of your brain and into your heart juice.
Heart juice. And so today we're discussing the personal mind. Personally, I don't have a mind. Personal mind. How do we describe the personal mind? Well, I guess by experience. The personal mind is the belief that everything you say, everything that's said to you, is about you. Is about you. It's about believing that.
I'm believing that everything that occurs in your life is about you.
So it's funny because when I tell our clients, like, you've been told by your parents the world doesn't revolve around you, but I don't think that's completely true. We know that energetically that, for example, anger or hate, when someone walks into a room, I always compare when you walk into Leon's, you know right away they're
commission salesman. Yeah.
You know, there's an energy that people carry often, and the love is like that too. So in that way, the world revolves around you, but in the way of a story, it does not.
Yeah, and that story that we create about who we are and what it means about us and this mask that we put on for the world.
Yeah.
And the way that we take things personally.
Yeah, the way we can, when someone says something, we think, it's funny because I'll tell a client, I'm like, if you could stand up into at a concert and say something mean and half the room would be like, oh, it's about me.
Yeah.
And so I that was a big one for me to overcome. I mean, one of the 4 agreements, from that wonderful book says, never take anything personally. And that's, for a lot of people, it doesn't resonate the same way as when we discuss the personal mind with them because they go, oh, okay, like that makes sense, but it really is about the difference between not really realizing that people are just coming from their own story and then believing that story's about you.
Yeah.
And so one thing we always say is, if we said like, you're an orange or a banana, and then someone says, is that hurt your feelings? No. But if we're like, you're a bad parent or you're lazy or you're not a good partner, they're like, well, that hurts. There's something, there's always something. There's a nerve. And I'm like, well, what's the difference?
Yeah.
And a lot of them just like, I don't know. I guess it's, it's about, there's some truth in it. It's a reality. Like, I'm not a banana. There's no reality to that. Or I know I'm not a banana. I'm like, so what you're saying is that you think there's a piece of reality that you're not those things.
Because your personal mind has created a story about what you need to be and what you aren't.
Story I always share as I swallow my Red Bull. The story I always share is like the real life thing for me when I went to Costco one time. And so I ran into somebody and they were like, hey, I always see you around, what do you have a job? You're like always free during the day. I'm like, yeah. And I was just leaving finance, just started coaching. I was like, I used to be, when you knew me and you saw me at coffee shops, I was in finance, but now I'm like a life coach and a speaker. And she's like, oh, you talk out your ass for a living. And I was like, cha-cha-cha. I felt the, and then I came back. Yeah, I guess.
Emotional damage.
So I remember I was really early in learning this understanding. And I came back and I called Arizona Andrew and I was like, a girl hurt my feelings. I was like, of course she did. He took it personally. And I was like, well, it was about me. He's like, no. I'm like, well, how else could you take it? He said, well, the impersonal mind. Like, well, what does that look like? I'm like, well, why didn't think she said it? And the worst 3 words that people say, like a teenager, I don't know. She's a coach. I wasn't curious.
Yep.
And so I was like, so I accidentally go back to Costco a couple days later and bump back into her because she worked there and she was a friend, and somebody I kind of just knew loosely at that point. And I was like, oh, hey, look, here you are in the aisle that you work in. And so brought up that conversation. And I was like, yeah, the other day you said I talk about my ass. She's like, yeah, you do. I was like, well, where does that come from? She's like, well, I was in a long-term relationship. It wasn't working out. I went to leave. He convinced me to go to therapy. I had to pay for, a majority of it. And he still left me and I lost all that money. And therapy's bullshit. It doesn't work. And I was like, that's how I feel.
Yeah.
And so we started discussing this understanding that was new. And she became a client and wrote one of the his testimonies. I realized I couldn't have helped her if I was in that place. And I also realized that not just in that moment, but how many other times in life that I was wounded by someone else's opinion because I had that opinion of myself.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the personal mind is always, I think it's such a major thing for people to overcome in our understanding, to realize like what people say and do is always about them and their judgments don't reflect you.
Yeah. They're not a reflection of you. It's their own judgments on where they're at. I had a client I was on the phone with the other day, and similar, she was telling me a story about being at a lunch with her kids. She's got 4 kids, 4 adult children. And one of the kids, she must have said something. She said, I can't remember what I said in the moment, but he got really upset and like stormed off, said some nasty stuff, and said, I need to go to the bathroom, and stormed off. And she said he came back and she told him about how hurtful what he said was, and that this has been a really hard journey for her. And it was, so on and so forth. But you don't know how much that hurt me that you said that, and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay. I'm like, well, how would you take that if you didn't take it personally and it wasn't about you? And she's like, well, it's funny that you say that, because then I had a conversation with my husband a little while later, and he said, he's going through some physical struggles right now. He's really sick and he's on the brink of maybe losing his job, and he's really in a tough way. And she's like, I realize his lashing out wasn't about me.
Yeah.
That he was just hurting.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's so common. Like, it's just so funny how when someone says something, we have like a judgment of like, they shouldn't say that, or, that's their problem. And, and that protective piece of who we are to say. And when you start taking things like about you, when you realize that nothing's really about you and that people are coming from their story and not yours.
Yeah.
And like what we always say is like, what's better than a better story of you is no story at all.
Yeah. And
that piece of identity, I mean, for those of you who've read my story or know, like I flatlined at the age of 5 and they had to test my IQ. And I always talk about that when I got my IQ tested, it turned out that I was a gifted individual. Don't worry, I'm not Einstein. I always say I tripped over the line. But the funny thing is that's a piece of like my identity, piece of my story. And then I thought, well, if I'm so smart, I had to be perfect.
Yeah.
And I always say I've literally done it a number of times where I pull on a door that says push in big red letters, and then I'm like, how can I be stupid? That's a stupid move. How can I be that? And then felt shame. And I think what happens is like we have these, holding opposites moments where we don't recognize how human we are. And so if we wanted to say in my situation like smart and then stupid. And we all have that version of smart and stupid. And so what we do is we kind of, because we want to protect our personal mind, we put stupid, we hide it. We hold out, we might not brag about it. Like, it's not something I walk around as my part of my story, as part as like, oh, look how smart I am. But like, it's there, but I don't want it to be disproven. I don't need to, and I want to be, at times I thought in certain businesses, I had to be the fastest guy.
So you never want stupid. You never want stupid to show. Yeah.
And then stupid slips out of your pocket because you're human. And then one of two things happens. Someone goes, ha ha. They point it out.
Yep.
And you either go into F you for judging me or F myself for like not being enough.
Yep.
And that's where the personal mind comes in, rather than recognizing, and now I recognize like it's really two halves of a whole. It's the yin and yang of our experience.
Yeah. And
that I am stupid and I am smart. Which ones, it doesn't matter. And I am handsome and ugly, and I am fat and thin, and I am tall and short. And if we could all just recognize that we're a more complete person, we can be something, but we're not only that.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things I really love too was, I can't remember if it was you or Arizona that said it to me, that people are always doing one of two things. They're either asking for love or offering love. Yeah. And I ran into that with my kids the other day. They were just chewing at each other, and I'm in the other room and I can hear them. And my son's like, he's getting annoyed. I can hear my daughter's picking at him, and she's just like pushing. And I come in the room and I'm like, what is going on, guys? Like, why are we fighting? And right away I'm like, I want to get mad. Like, guys, stop, just enough. And then I realized, okay, there's something else going on here. So I sit down. I'm like, guys, what's really happening? Well, she's saying this and he's saying, and she's like, well, he won't stop playing his game. And I'm like, okay, well, I asked my son, I'm like, why are you getting so upset about this? Well, she keeps on pushing. She's trying. I said, are you intentionally trying to get on your brother's nerves right now? And she's like, yeah, I am actually. I'm like, okay, why? Why are you trying to get on your brother's nerves? Why would you intentionally try to bother your brother? And she goes, well, I'm just kind of hoping if I bug him enough, maybe he'll stop playing his game. And now they'd been apart. You know how close my two youngest are.
Very close.
And they'd been apart all weekend doing their own things. They were both pretty tired. And that's why do you want him to stop playing his game? Well, I don't know. I guess I was thinking maybe he'd play with me. Like, okay. Like, do you think there's better ways you could ask for that? And she goes, yeah. And he goes, well, why wouldn't you just ask me that? And I'm like, well, she didn't know how to in the moment, buddy.
Right.
But recognize something. People are always asking for love or offering love.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you see that she's just looking for love because she loves you and she wants to spend time with you, how does that change the way you react to this? And he's like, yeah, I can turn off my game.
That's beautiful. It's a great lesson for all of us to recognize, like, a lot of people are acting in ways where we think they're angry, or we think they're frustrated, or they think they're being needy, or they think there's such a judgment on this concept of what we talked about before, like toxic people or difficult people.
Yeah.
But they're just people that are in a spot where they feel alone.
Yeah.
Not enough. And the personal mind says, it's all about, me, not the story about me and how it aligns with the situation.
Yeah.
And like, I love, that's why I do actually really enjoy the book by Steve Chandler, The Story of You, because he deconstructs, that story of who you are has been given to you by someone else. And when you realize that you don't have to defend your story,
yeah,
that you don't have to prove it, or you don't have to, make it part of your experience. Like your past is, obviously part of your experience, but it shouldn't define you. It should just describe your situation, and it's an interesting part of it. But when you start to build your who you are based off of it, and then it goes against it, I see that we see it a lot with all sorts of things in life where people are like, well, I get angry because I saw that. That's another thing. People are like, I get angry because I grew up with an angry dad. I'm like, how many relationships did you have outside of your father like, since that time in your life? And it'd be like, technically, like, if you count teachers and friends and other members, it could be from 500 to thousands. I was like, and how many people were like your dad? Well, just him. I was like, so that was the one person you modeled after? The rest were
he was the catalyst. He was who you decided to model yourself after, which is, it's cool. The one thing that you've really taught me well is that the past is full of lessons for us. It doesn't define who we are, but to go back in the past and understand what we were learning in that moment, and that's how we made, and the choice that we made, and then when we carry that forward into the present and where we are, it's about understanding that lesson and being able to share that moving forward, or see yourself differently and see the choice that you can make differently in the moment.
Right, because when you have a story about who you are, then anything that goes against that will wound you. And especially when you're trying to build your story. I don't know why. I don't know if it's like a narrative for most people, but it's like when you're born, it's like, okay, once upon a time, there was a guy named Morgan, and then this happened, and this happened, and this happened. And then you're in the middle of the story, and you want to have this like Disney happy ending.
Yeah.
Disney. This happy ending, and you're like, okay, I got to make sure that the story goes the way I need to be. And you see that with people who say, well, I'm older and I'm not married yet, or I don't have a home yet, and they start trying to think that story of creating is going to make them feel better.
Yep.
And then things don't go that way, and they think I'm not enough, or this person said something and hurt my feelings because it aligns with something I don't believe in myself, or goes against something I think about myself.
Yep.
Then taking things personally is really interesting, because, what part of you is not part of the whole. Like when we look up and judge ourselves or others, when we say, oh, I don't have that, we're discounting that as you always say, if you see it in someone,
it exists within you.
Yeah, you got it, as Brent always says. And then when it's below you and you judge it, it exists within you as well. So, but rather than seeing someone as above or below you, see that as part of you, and then recognize that makes you human, and then you see everyone as the same. Because if it takes away your power when you look and covet something, you think you can't be that. And when you look down on someone, you're disconnecting from that part of you that's in there too, rather than understanding that people are in different proportions of who they are on this spectrum of, there's been times I've been very generous, and there's been times I've been greedy in moments.
Yep.
There's been times where I've been honest, and there's times I've lied. There's been times, I mean, I can be, and I know in my natural state of the truth of who I am, I'm more favorable as a human because that's what's inside of us.
Yeah.
But when the human experience comes up and things occur, and that's usually where conflict occurs, where someone chooses something about their story over, And so, it's really common for people, if you can overcome taking things personally and believing that you are something in the story, it's going to really shift you in a lot of ways. Because when someone says something to you like, oh, I wouldn't do that, or like I always tell that story about when I did magic, and my mom's like, oh, you're gonna, no one's gonna pay that much for magic.
Yep.
I could have taken that personally and thought she doesn't believe in me.
Yep.
And I always go back to that story I'll finish that thought. I could have taken it personally, but instead I recognized she was speaking from her place of not being able to create that, and the fear of me maybe
and trying to
being
protect
successful,
you,
protecting me. But I also love that story. I don't know have we shared the story about the time Gracie was dancing on the picnic table?
Oh,
did we share that?
No,
yet?
I don't think we have.
That's a perfect story for this because the personal mind. So I remember I was sitting beside someone who was in the process of coaching with us. Yeah. And it was your birthday, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, it was.
And Gracie's and your daughter's in hip hop dance, and she's great at it. And for her, your birthday, she decided to dance. And the first comment that turned your head when she went to get up on the picnic table to do like your mom was like, careful. And I was like, oh, she's fine. She has to be used to being on a stage because she's danced first dancer. And you looked at me like, I'm like, no, that kind of stage. And we all laughed. And then I was just sitting there, and I don't know what your daughter did, but your mom said, that's what I love about Gracie. She's always happy. And in that moment, I leaned over and said, to the person we were talking to, and I said, that's how you unintentionally screw somebody up. Yeah. And I'm not sure it'll ever happen. And I know your daughter doesn't probably think this way because she's with you and well-rounded, but those kind of comments saying that's how she's always happy. The story and taking things personally could be, oh my gosh, my grandma thinks she loves me because I'm always happy. Yeah. And I always have to be happy. I have to be happy. I always have to be happy. And that's the personal mind too. That's part of the thinking like, okay, here's who I am to people. Because a lot of us try to figure out who we are by looking back at others and be like, you tell me who I am by the feedback, because we're so uncertain of who we are. But I think, and I know I'm going on a bit here, but the reason why I think we're not sure who we are is we start to create ourselves based off of what people tell us in favor to be liked. And then when that part of us goes out and someone says something against it, it hurts so bad because we work so hard to be seen. And I remember there was a time in my life, probably just before we met, but including that, where I felt like I couldn't have been pissed on if I was on fire because, I wasn't being seen. And I thought no matter what I did, why am I not being appreciated? Why am I not being validated? And, not really seeing it for what it was, but then being really hurt when I wasn't, the hardest thing for me was when I loved somebody and they're like, you didn't love me properly. And I would be like,
oh, I did it wrong.
Rather than recognizing they were coming with conditions and they were like, now I see that people, I can love them to my fullest. And even if I'm perfect, they're like, you didn't love me right. I'm like, you're very difficult to love then. You have conditions.
There's
don't
all kinds of hoops,
after midnight,
all kinds of hoops to jump through. Yeah.
I'm like loving a gremlin. The too many hoops. And now I'm not as deterred and just stay consistent. And a lot of those people end up coming back into your life because they recognize that, it was about them. Yeah. And if I took it personally, then I would be burning that bridge the way I used to before I learned this.
Burning a bridge or putting up a boundary, creating walls to stop you from ever
how dare you hurt me
to occur again.
How dare you point out how human I am? And that's what I say when someone says something, you're like, oh, you're like this, I'm like, thank you for pointing out how human I am. Like I am a human. I am, and that's a very important thing for people think coaches have to be perfect and have their life together. And I think that if you look at really the truth, we apply this and it's made a difference in our lives. Yeah, for sure. But I think that often people who have failed the most in life have the most to teach. And I think the people that have like the best we know from the story of you, the best batting coach was someone who had the most strikeouts in MLB history.
He knew what not to do.
Yeah. And I think that if you're afraid to make mistakes, you're afraid to learn.
Absolutely.
And it's the personal, but again, it goes back to the personal mind. Like, so if someone says something and it hurts you, ask yourself, why?
Yeah. Well, and equally as destructive can be when somebody gives you a compliment and you take that. I always say to people that a compliment and an insult should hit the same way.
Agreed.
Agreed. But it doesn't mean anything about who you are. That's somebody else's judgment.
Yeah, I remember, I think I told you when I was performing magic at restaurants, I would do like 10 tables and 9 would be like, you're amazing. And one would be like, yeah. And they wouldn't enjoy it, or they'd insult me and say something like, you're one level above a mime, or your parents must be embarrassed. I remember telling a young lady that at, I think it was Boston Pizza or whatever, doesn't matter. And, free promo Boston Pizza. Never had any food poisoning because they boiled every, they said, oh, I was working. I was like, oh, what are you doing? They're like, oh, I'm at Queens. I'm like, what are you taking? Psychology. I was like, oh, that's what I took. And they're like, great, this is my future. But if I was in the place I was before, that would have destroyed me. Yeah. I would have thought she's looking down at me. I thought I would have had to overprove myself. I'm a successful businessman.
Well, we had somebody do that at a magic show that you were at. I was there for it, and he's made that comment of, well, that's really nice that he can support his family doing magic.
Yeah, the difference between a large pizza and a magician. A large pizza can feed a family of 4.
Yeah,
yeah, I love those kind of thoughts so that people and again, it just comes from where they're at, from their perspective. And the more I see like the beliefs that people carry, which we talked about before, but also like how all these things intertwine, and then the personal mind. But for me, never taking anything personally is just realizing, well, think about it. If someone's judging you, I always tell clients, if someone says, oh, you're too thin, what are they really saying? They're not saying about your body. They're saying, I worry about my body. Yeah. If they say you work too hard, they probably feel like they're not putting in the right effort. If they say, if they make a judgment on you, it's more of a reflection of where they're at than where you are. Yep. And it's not a judgment piece. It just helps you understand where they're seeing the world. Yep. It doesn't mean they're a bad person. Yeah. It just means that they have their own thoughts and stories that are kind of interfering into their person. Yeah.
Yeah. It was my grandmother all growing up. Every time I saw her, it was a comment on either your weight, or how well dressed you were, or how nice you look, but that was her existence, right? And her whole world was based around, like, she always had to have her jewelry on, and she didn't want people to see her without makeup, and physical appearance was really important to her. And so it was never, now that she's 91 years old, and it's just like, whatever, I don't care anymore.
Yeah, it's funny with gray hairs, you stop caring about what people think. But if you can really stop, because there's a difference between not caring what they think from your mind, like I don't care, and not caring, and not caring from a place of understanding. Yeah, and that's the biggest shift, is not like trying to put up a wall and defend. Yeah, versus just seeing that it's okay. Like, people are gonna have judgments and stories, and they're in their own head. And if you can just see where they're at, it will help you really see them clearly. And that will help you navigate them in such a friendly way that it doesn't cause problems. And you're not making it about you when someone's like, makes a comment or a story. Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's pretty much it.
Like that pretty much sums up the personal mind.
Yeah. Never take anything personally. Yeah. And understand that you are all things. And I know you're trying to be more than one thing, but don't try so hard, and realize that if you are that, it's going to happen naturally. And you can put down the fact that you're trying to be perfect, because we've talked about perfectionists, being a perfectionist on episode 10. And you don't have to be perfect. You are perfect by being balanced in both, all the things we are. And you can't be both. You're all of it. And just naturally let the best part of you occur by being understanding and love and service and all those things, and being the truth of who you are. And if you struggle with that, as many people do, understand this isn't information, it's transformation, and you have a chance to connect with us while we're here and have conversations. Please write us or reach out for a meeting and come and experience it yourself and see how we help guide you to the truth of who you are.
Absolutely.
But that's it for today.
That's it. Yeah. Don't forget to follow us, like, comment, share with your friends if you found value in this, and keep coming back for more.
Thank you so much for being here and listening. We hope you're well.
All right. Much love.